Hello, welcome to the first Mesh screencast about what is Mesh, how does it work, and can you use it to actually do real programming work. Uh, so what we're going to build today is the very basics, the foundation of an RSS reader. And the background is I used Google Reader a very long time ago, back when it was around, and then it probably shut down because it doesn't make any money. And then I switched to Dig Reader, which was actually a really nice interface, and I still really like the product. Unfortunately, that's, however, shutting down as well because RSS readers don't really allow you to generate money unless you're charging a per month fee or something like that. So I've decided it's not good to rely on other people for this function. If you want to do it right, you have to do it yourself. And so what we're going to do is build a simple RSS reader. It's going to take some URLs. It's going to download the XML, which is how RSS feeds are represented. It's going to interpret them using JavaScript's built-in parsers. And then we're going to build a list of articles, including their titles and links. So a lot of this is using a prototype version of Mesh. Not all the features are working, but enough are working that we can actually build something real that works. So we're going to start by making a list of all the URLs we want to download RSS from. So we're going to type into an empty cell. Just going to type in URLs, and then it will create a name for us in the background. So for that, I'm going to hide the code pane on the right. I can open it and close it using Alt F11, just like VBA in Excel. A lot of this code here is boilerplate code to enable us to create tables, which aren't a literal construct that's in JavaScript by default, but we can create it using a prototype of an object. We'll see that near the end of this presentation, but to start, you can see that what we've done here by creating this URL thing is we've created a binding of the name URLs to a function that takes in the spreadsheet and the object, and then will basically fill in its formula with the context of that spreadsheet. So it's getting around, passing around this or whatever of objects. That's all by the by. You don't really need to know how it's working behind the scenes to use a product. So let's just go back to building this using just a spreadsheet interface. So the first thing we want to do is put in one of our feed URLs. So what we're going to do is turn this into an array. We're just going to type in an empty array here. It'll then recognize it's an array and then allow us to append data to it, just like in Excel. You don't have to worry about putting string delimiters in or anything like that. It'll automatically handle that for you. So we can put in a few. We're going to just put in one for now. Next thing we're going to do is figure out a way to download XML. Tell you what, let's leave that for a bit later. For now, let's assume we've downloaded the XML and we want to just, parse it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an array of XMLs, which are going to represent the XML coming from each of these URLs. We're going to make this an array as well. And let's just give it some hard-coded data for now. So we're going to, let me just open this so you can see what's happening. We're going to put some string delimiters around this as a template string, but it doesn't really matter. This is just the W3 School's default RSS version 2.0 XML example. Let's just press enter to get that in. And it's there. So if we go back to it, we can see it's the start of it there. Okay, so now we've got some XML in our spreadsheet. Let's actually start doing something with this XML. So let's assume we've got a series of XML strings here and we want to start processing them. So let's get their items. So let's go over here. Let's create the name items and let's map over the XMLs. So the way you represent another variable on sheet at the moment is using the $sign. So let's go x.xmls.map and let's create a parser for each one of these. So new DOM parser, parse from string. Oops. A lot of this is stuff you can look up on MDN, which is the go-to resource nowadays for JavaScript information. Okay, so what this should do is it'll take in all of these XMLs, it'll then run a parser over them and pull out any items in an array with the query with the element item, and you can see what we're doing here. What it's going to do is go through and find each of these items and then pull them into an array. Okay, so now we have a no list, and that's all the items for that specific XML. Now we're going to have a lot of these, and we want to be able to put these into a format that we can easily process. So let's flatten them. So let's go flat items, and let's start flattening these items. So what we're going to do is, again, go over those items. This time we're going to reduce. So items.reduce. And what this will do is take a function. This is the standard JavaScript array functions. It's going to take we may get this wrong, but you can fix it later. It'll take each one of these and then an aggregator. So let's go ag array and then current array, and then we want to give back each item in the aggregate array and then each item in the current array, and then give it a starting point to work from as well. So an empty array to start. And what it's done is it's split out each of these items into a flattened version. Okay, so now I've got this in a format we can start processing. We can start pulling this into a table that we can start to work with. So this will be a little bit manual at the moment because I haven't fully implemented the UI controls for tables, for example, per column information and so on, but we can write the whole literal at once. So let's start off with that. We have to put, due to JavaScript ambiguity around curly brackets, we have to put a smooth parentheses at the start. So let's define this object as a table. And the way, I'll show you after we define this, the way tables get in here is there's some boilerplate in the starting point for a mesh file. And let's say, okay, what do we want to do here? We want to get three things. We want to get the title, the link, and the description from each of these items and put it into a table so that each of them has appears in a column of title, link, and description respectively. So what's the best way to do this? Well, what we can do is we can go through each of these flattened items, each of these elements, and then for each one, we can append it to the bottom of an array that has that title, or we can produce this pre-processed effectively, and then the table object doesn't have to do anything. For the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to build this as a series of columns. So let's do that now. So we've got our prototype. Now what do we want? We want the title, and we want this to be the process version of each of the items. So let's go items dot query selector title, and then we want text content. Let's see if this works. We really want to map these. Item dot. Okay, and then we'll close that off. And what's the unexpected token here? We haven't fully closed it off, maybe? No, what's happening here? Looks okay. Maybe it's the quotes around it? No. What is the problem? Oh, of course. It's because we haven't even named this thing yet. So let's make a name. Okay. So that break with your intuition of how things work from Excel is one of the things I'm a little bit worried about in the context of Mesh. And maybe I'm thinking that these, creating a name by default when you type in a blank cell is probably the wrong way to go. The better way to go is to enable you to start typing values in straight away, and then on the background it'll randomly create names that you can then modify to be human readable later. In any case, query selector is not a function. Is that right? Well, let's figure out what we're doing here. That doesn't seem right to me. We shouldn't be using items, we should be using flat items. Okay, now we have a table. Excellent. So that's working, and now we know how this works. We can start to build this out more concretely. So let's add some extra columns here. So as I said, the way we do tables right now is not so great, but we can still modify the source code directly. So let's say we want description, and we want to get the description. And we also want to get the link. So let's do that as well. Okie doke. Now those will appear. So this is, as I said, using a hard-coded version of the XML, but we can actually use something a little bit different and start using the actual XML. So I happen to have a function here that will download data from the internet. It's not async, it's not in parallel or anything fancy like that. It's simply going to work through a given URL and download the contents from it. So let's put that function to the spreadsheet. Cool, so now we have a function, and now instead of using this XML thing here, we can start to loop over each of these URLs and then download their XML. So let's do that. Instead of having this this literal here, what we'll do is we'll turn this into a function result. So let's go up to, where is it? It is here. Instead of returning an array that's a literal, let's return what's it going to be? It's going to be URLs, map, URL, download data, URL. And that looks okay. Now I'll come back here. And boom, it's done. For all these Slate Star Codex parts of their feed. So you can see there's a whole bunch of them. And now let's add some more URLs here because we don't really want to have just one feed. We want to have a whole bunch. So I've chosen a couple of others. One, Quanta, which is a very cool science and tech magazine. So let's append that as well. And let's also append Bees and Bomb, which is a really cool geometric GIFs site. I highly recommend having a look at that. All right, and it's a little bit slow because it's having to download each of them in turn, but you can see that straight away we have a table that is expanding itself, and you've got all the links and so on. And now we can start opening a web page or writing a web page that is able to consume this table. We've done all the data processing work here already, and now we can, because this is a JavaScript file, import it into an HTML page that will consume this table, and then perhaps do some nice UI around showing the title, description, the link, and maybe we can start adding some extra columns here around the date time that the publication of that feed, and then sorting and so on, which I won't show right now. So what have we done? So we've taken a whole bunch of URLs and we've got what their XML content is. We've gone through to see how we can put functions into a spreadsheet, and we've created some mappings that are expanding of arbitrary length, and we can use standard JavaScript constructs such as maps over arrays, reducing arrays, and also objects that are quite rich in terms of the prototypes you can add to them. And also we've demonstrated the prototype table prototype that is included by default in Mesh, that enables Mesh to understand, to show the objects rather than a list of random objects like this. We can actually start to break out the contents of those objects into a convenient table format. So there are some issues that are to be addressed, and I'll go through them briefly. One of them is that to paste information into Mesh right now, you need to go into edit mode, whereas I would like to be able to click a cell and then paste with Control V. The second thing is that the way the string delimiters are working right now is not so great. Right now it assumes all strings are template strings, but they won't always work in the case of something like when you want to use different delimiters potentially, or you've got backticks in your string itself. One of the other things which is a higher level concern is that in a regular REPL, like a console in JavaScript, in the developer console, you're able to expand these objects out to see what is behind the scenes, what they actually contain. And I had to do a bit of work when I was writing the script for this to see what was actually the right methods to use in breaking apart these objects to get the right information. So maybe one of the ways that Mesh can help do that is by having a separate formula bar like thing up here where you can start to dig in. A lot of that is to be determined, but right now what I'm concerned about is creating a convenient core for getting the core functionality in place, including adding proper UI elements for tables and so on, and also the niceties of UI. So figuring out what the best way is to handle columns of different lengths, because right now that's fixed and it's truncating a lot of the data, which is not so great. A lot of this is to be determined, but hopefully this has shown that you can create real-world programs with Mesh, that you can get a lot of the benefits of working in a spreadsheet, such as the ability to easily work with literals and to abstract a lot of the details of how the syntax is represented behind the scenes, i.e. here. And yeah, let me know if any feedback or comments on how this was approached and anything you'd like to see further. Thanks very much.